Hey everyone, in this video we'll begin to build our front end with Next.js for our local reviews site. There'll be a lot of new concepts here, so if you're unfamiliar with Next.js but you're familiar with React, it should be fairly easy to follow along. The goal of this video is just to give you enough to be able to build with Next.js if you have that basic React experience. So if you don't, you may want to watch or go read the official React tutorial or find some other video that goes over those basics, but I'll try to explain everything I can as best I can as we go through it as well. We will use a new CSS library as well called Material UI for this project to make styling it a little easier. So let's go ahead and get started by going over some basics of Next.js. So right here, I have the documentation pulled up. I'll link this in the description if you want to go through this. This goes through a lot of the basics. It'll be more than what we go through in this video. So if you want to go through some other things, this will be here. If you run localhost 3000, which I'll show you how to do it in a second, you'll see the links here. And you click on the learn, and it takes you right there as well. So that's two ways to get to it. But to run the servers, I already have it running. I'll show you real quick how we're going to do this. So I have two terminal windows open here. And so what we're going to do here, I go up a directory, you'll need to first activate your virtual environment for Python. Then you want to cd into this backend directory. So my environment's already activated, so I'll go ahead now and just cd in the backend. And from here, I can just run Python 3 manage.py run server, just like we do on pretty much any Python application. And that will run our API. And then you should be able to go to localhost 8000 and get to it there. And it should bring this up. And then for the front end, once you get to your root directory here, you should have a backend and a front end folder. We'll see into the front end folder, and then we'll run npm run dev, and that should run your development server for Next.js. And if you do nothing else and just have a basic starter project, this should come up right here. And there's always for links here to get some examples, see the documentation, or go through this learning course they have for it right here. If you want to go through that as well. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and go through some basic Next.js concepts. So Next.js has lots of benefits to using it over just using your plain old React. They have image optimization. They have a very nice integrated routing, file system routing concept they have, which I'll go over here in a minute. They have built-in API routes, and they have built-in CSS support and many other things as well. And so this gives you more than just a typical client-side JavaScript framework ability. It gives you some extra things on top of that. So first we'll go over that file system routing. And what this will allow us to do, allow us to very easily create routes. So if you're familiar with typical React, you'll have to bring in like the router and then create your routes inside of the component there or inside of your base function, base class, and then use that to define all your routes. But in the case of Next.js, inside your front end folder, you'll have this pages folder. Inside of here, you have all of your pages. So you have this API folder, which you'll ignore, and we'll get back to it in a little bit. But then you have this underscore app, which is like your kind of base class, or in this case, it's a function for your project or for your app. And then you have this index.js. And this index.js automatically routes to the root just at localhost 3000 where our server is running. I can create other routes by just creating more files and folders within here. So let's say we want to create something to show our categories. I'll create a new folder and I'll call this categories. Now inside of categories here, I'll go ahead and create a new file and I'll save this as index.js. And automatically this index.js will point to the root path of our root/categories. And so I went ahead and generated a component, which I should be able to do here with RCC. This is a Sublime package. I think it's called React ES6 snippets. If you install it, you have these options here, and you can generate a component automatically like this. And so I'll call this categories. I'll go ahead and remove the props here. Now if I save this, now inside this div here, if I go ahead and just put categories like that, and real quickly I'm going to fix my syntax. If I go to view, syntax, Babel, JavaScript, and then save that. And so now here that I have this categories page here at /category/index, which is just the root of this folder, it should show categories. Let's go ahead and try that real quick. So I go here to localhost 3000, I go to /categories, and then takes me to this page here where it says categories. So I can create more routes just like this. I can go and just create more folders and then put index.js to go to any sort of route off the root just like that. But I can also do other things as well. For example, I create a new file here. I can save this one as square bracket ID closing square bracket.js. And now this will go to categories /an ID. So once again, I'll generate a component and we'll rename this to be, I did the wrong one. Let's go ahead and fix that. Let's go ahead and do the functional component. And I'll call this one just ID. It can be whatever you want. And then down here, I'll go ahead and just type the ID, just put ID. And now I can go to /categories/any ID number and it will render this page. So back in here, if I change this, I go to /categories/1, and then it shows ID. That can be any number. If I did 2, it still shows ID. If I did 200, it still works showing ID. So this is a way to create a route that should go to any ID. So if you want to show a specific category, you could pass the ID in here and render that category based on whatever ID is passed in the URL. The same thing goes for a slug. So if I rename this file here to be in square brackets, but instead of ID, I call it slug, I can go ahead and pass in a slug here and it will render this slug page instead. So if I go back here, now instead of 200, I'll just put ABC or any amount of text here and it shows slug. So you can see pretty quickly how powerful this is, how easy it is to create more routes. I can create any folder structure and pass in index or square brackets ID, square brackets slug, or whatever else, and it will generate pages for me based off of what's passed into the URL. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, we're going to use this a lot throughout the project, and so you'll get more practice and understanding of that if it's still kind of not super clear. Next, what we have here is this API folder. And we'll go ahead and look at the example here, which is hello.js. And you'll see here they have the link to the documentation for that if you want to read up more on this. But generally what this is it allows you to create an API endpoint using as a Node.js serverless function. We won't use this a whole lot. We might use it a little bit, but Next.js is not just a client-side packet framework. It also has server-side functions you can use as well. And so you can create a server-side API endpoint here that you can use inside your front end. And you can create those Node.js functions here and interact with those within your pages elsewhere in the project. For now, I wouldn't really worry too much about this as we won't use it much. If we do, I'll go over this in more detail, but just know this is here and this is an option as well if you want to use that. Okay, that is kind of the basics of this pages and everything we use here. Let's go ahead and install Material UI and let's create our first page. And then we'll go into some more Next.js basics after that. So to install Material UI, I'm going to open my terminal again and I'm going to stop my front end server. Make sure you're in your front end folder here because otherwise you won't install it correctly. So once you're in your front end, we can go ahead and type npm install and we'll do @material-ui/core. Install that. Next, we need to get the Roboto font. And in the documentation for Material UI, it has a link tag. But in our case, it'll be much easier to get the import syntax instead. So I'm going to go and open a new window up here and find that Roboto font. And if you Google Roboto Google Fonts, it should be the first link that shows up. We click on that link. We'll come here. And what we need here is the 300. So we'll add this one by hitting select style on the right. We need the 400, 500, and 700. So we'll find regular 400, select that style, medium 500, select that style, and bold 700, select that style. Now over here on the right here, you'll see our fonts are added, and we can click on this import button, and will give us this import syntax instead of a typical link syntax. I'm gonna go ahead and copy this. We'll add this to the default CSS file for all of our global styles for this project. So back inside of our Sublime text editor, we have by default this styles here, and we have this globals.css. At the top of this file, I'm gonna go ahead and paste that import statement and save that. You'll also notice here we have this home.module.css. If you want to create separate style sheets for each page, there's this built-in way of doing that, of creating name of the page .module.css. But since we're using Material UI, this is not going to be used at all, so we won't need to worry about that for this project. That's another option there if you decide to want to use that as well. Finally, the last thing we need to do to get this up and running is to install the font, or install the icons, the Material UI icons. And we can do that with npm install at material-ui/icons. And that should cover everything we need to get started with this project. And so just to double check, we should be able to go through here and check for our package.json. There should be, yes, right here, Material UI core and Material UI icons should be in your dependencies. Make sure that's there because you'll need that to for this to work. Okay, now with that done, let's go ahead and move on. And we'll create our first page. So we'll go ahead and we'll go to our we'll go just to our index page, just the root URL, and we're gonna go ahead and remove a lot of this. So instead of yeah, let's go ahead and delete everything within the return, and we'll just make our own. To get rid of all of this, we also don't need this home.module.css. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. And for now, we don't need this image tag or this head tag, so I'll remove all of that as well. I'm also gonna go ahead and just delete the home.module.css file because we're not gonna be using that at all. Okay, now we'll go ahead and save that. And now our page should be blank if we were to go back to it. So we'll go back here and we'll go back to the root. Oh, we didn't run the server again. Let's go ahead and rerun our server again. And this might throw an error because there's nothing there. Yeah, so we just have it because it's empty. That's fine. We'll go ahead and build the page now. So Material UI, I'll go ahead and pull that up real quick, has some documentation over here to go through what the different components they have. If you go to this, if you go back here to these three lines here, click on that, go to components, you'll see documentation for everything we're about to use. The first one will be this grid to create a grid. So you can click on that and you can read up how it works and how to use it. You can find these source buttons here to look at the code of how to actually create what they have up here. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through all these things. If you want to read up more on them, these docs will be in the description. You can look at them there. So the first thing I'm gonna do is create that grid. And so I'll do here is I'll do a grid. And inside of this grid tag here, we'll put first container. And we'll add a spacing equaling 3 for now. And we need to go ahead and import that here at the top. So this will be import, and we'll put our curly braces here, and we'll do grid, and this will be from material-ui/core. Okay, and now let's have our grid here. We're gonna go ahead and for now, we're gonna create one simple card. Or actually, we'll create three cards. And right now, this will just be dummy data until we make an API call to get our actual data from our API. But inside this container grid, I can make another grid tag and put, instead of container, put item for each of our individual items. And they have different sizes you can use here. I'm gonna set XS, so on small screens, it will go the entire width of the screen, which is 12. And on medium screens, it will only be a third of that, so we'll put 4. Inside of this grid here, I'm going to go ahead and create a card. And this is another component from Material UI. We'll create a card header. And inside of here, we'll add an avatar. And this will be equal some curly braces here. We'll put an avatar component inside of here. And we'll add this. And we'll add the label to equal just category. And we'll put a C inside of that. And we'll go ahead and close off our avatar component there. We'll add a title. And for now, this will just be category. A subheader as well. And this will equal see all for now, just some sort of filler text. Okay, we'll go ahead and close off that card header. And we'll go and close off our card right here. Okay, let's go ahead and import all of these things. So up here, we'll import card header, avatar. That might be it. Let's go ahead and save that now and see how this looks when we load it. Okay, so we're getting an error, unterminated JSX contents. That would be because, oh, I forgot to close off the grids. That would be a problem. Okay, let's go and close off our grid components as well. And in my import statement, I forgot to put the @ so it should look the same as how we installed it. It should be @ Material UI core. And we'll go ahead and try this again. Okay, there we go. So now we have one card shown up here. It's kind of plain, and we'll add more to this later, but for now, just to get a basic page working, that's all we're going to do. We can go ahead and copy this grid item multiple times, and it should show up 3 wide on our screen. So we copy this down 2 more times and save that. Come back here and reload the page. You'll see we have 3 cards across the screen now. And these later will link to the actual category to show all the businesses. But since we have none of that created or anything ready to go yet, we're not going to worry with that in this video. But you'll notice here, by just the basic styles, there's some issues. Like it's kind of like against the top and the sides of the screen here. You better have some padding and kind of make it kind of fit better on the screen. And we can do this using some built-in style functions within Material UI. So what we'll do here is at the very top, above our export default function, we can go ahead and add a const use styles, and this will equal a make styles function. And inside of here, we'll pass in theme, and this will be an arrow function. We'll put parentheses and then curly braces. And now inside of here, I can add all of the styles I want to add. So for example, I'll make a root style, or I should say class. These are all the classes we'll add to our items. So I'll make a root class. And inside this root class here, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 things. First, add some margin to give some spacing around the edges, or on the top and bottom, and we'll center it in this on the width on the left and right. So I'll create a margin of 25 pixels and auto to center it on the width. Next, I'll add a max width. This way it doesn't go to the edge of the screen. And I'll just add a 95 viewport with max width right there. And now inside of our export default functions, we can go ahead and create a const classes. This will equal our use styles function we just made. And now I can do classes dot whatever, in this case classes dot root, to access this class right here. So now on our container grid, I'm going to add a class name, which in React, this is how you add classes with class name. So class name, and inside here, I'll put classes.root and save that. And I also need to import, before I forget, make styles. I believe it comes from the same core. So we'll do make styles right there. And there we go. Now we have some spacing, and it's not to the edge of the screen. There's some gaps and some gutters on the sides, as well as some space on the top. Okay, perfect. So now we have a really kind of basic page created using Material UI and some cards. Let's go ahead and add a nav bar. And to do this, I'm going to do something a little differently. I'm going to create a component called layout. And this layout will hold things that will go on every page. So in the case of this, we'll go ahead and create a new folder inside of our front end. And we'll call this components. These will just be typical React components. So I'll create a new file here. I'm going to go ahead and save this as layout with a capital L.js, like we typically do for React components. We'll start with a capital letter. And I'm going to go ahead and generate it's not what I wanted. Let's go ahead and generate a stateless functional component here. And so this layout component will just take all of our components that we want to add to every page. We'll put them on the page wherever we want them. And then we'll also put the children. And we're going to wrap this component around every other function we have. So what we'll do here is inside of the arguments here, we'll pass in an object, and we want to go ahead and grab children out of the props. And this will just be anything that's a child of this layout component, which will be, in our case, everything. I can go ahead and make this just a React fragment. And now instead of here, first I'm going to go ahead and just put in children and nothing else. If I go ahead and save that now, I should be able to wrap this layout component around our grid here. So I'll do layout like that, and then down here I'll go ahead and close out layout like that. I'm going to go ahead and indent everything inside of it, and this should still work as it did before. I need to import it too as well. I always forget that. Let's go ahead and import layout from /components/layout. There we go. Okay, and now so our cards are still showing up now, but we wrapped it inside of this layout component that we created and imported in. Now we can go ahead and create another component for our nav bar and add it to our layout component. So inside of our components folder, we'll create a new file. We'll save this as nav.js. Once again, I'll generate a new functional component. We'll call it nav, that's okay. And now we'll build a nav bar using the app bar component that we have available to us in our material UI library. So once again here, I'll create a fragment here. And now inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and add an app bar. We'll add a position equaling static. And we can change that later if we want to, but for now we'll keep it static. Then we'll add a toolbar component inside of that. And now inside of this toolbar component, first we'll create an icon button. And this will be the 3-line button that you see like on Material UI's documentation. We're gonna have that same sort of thing here. So we'll do an edge start. Then we'll do a color. Actually, I'm gonna add some class names as well, and I'll create these in a second using the same thing that we did before. So we'll add a class name of classes.menu button. A color equals inherit. Menu. Okay, we'll close off that icon button. Then we'll go and close off. Then we'll go and add a menu icon here, and we can add that using just the same component syntax we normally use. Now I'll add a menu icon. Then we can go ahead and close off this icon button component. Go ahead and indent this one in, and that should be our icon showing there now. Next, we'll add a typography component. So do typography, and this will be a variant equaling h6, and we'll add a class name here. This will equal classes.title. We'll close off that, and we'll set the title to be local reviews, and this will be the title inside of our navbar. Then we'll go and close off that component as well. Then we can close off our toolbar and then our app bar. Okay, now before we do anything else, let's go ahead and import all of this stuff. So up here at the top, we'll go ahead and do the same sort of import statement. So it'll be import, and it will be curly braces from @material UI/core. Okay, now inside of here, We'll add app bar, icon button, make styles, which we'll use here in a second, toolbar, and we'll add the typography as well. There we go. Now let's go ahead and add our styles that we added here. We'll go and add a class for that. So like we did before, we will create a const use styles function. This will be equal to make styles. We'll pass in the theme. And I guess real quick, in case you're wondering, this theme here is the theme of the Material UI, which we can customize, which we probably will do later. And there's different functions on this we could also use for like breakpoints and other things like that. So we may use this sometimes, but most of the time this will be left just blank and not really used at all. Now inside of this make styles function here, we want to go ahead and add a couple different classes. So first we'll add a root. And this root will have a flex grow set to 1. We'll create a menu button and we'll add a margin right. And we can use a special syntax where instead of using dashes, we put one word and capitalize everything but the first letter, or the first word, I should say. And then this will use our theme here. So this will be theme.spacing of 2. So this is one case where we do use this theme argument here. We can grab the spacing to set the spacing to be 2, which this is a default value set within our theme. And finally, we'll add one more class here, which will be down here. This will be title, and this will be set to flex grow of 1 as well. Okay, we'll go ahead and save all of that. I think that should be it. Let's go ahead and try it now. And I guess we didn't actually use it yet, so it's not going to do anything yet. Let's go ahead and jump into our layout. Let's go ahead and bring it in. So we'll do import nav from nav. And then down here, I'm going to go ahead and add our nav bar right above the children. So show at the top of the screen, just like that. And I just did realize that there's one thing that I forgot, which is to import the menu icon, the menu icon. So we'll do from, or import menu icon from, and this will be at material UI / icon / menu. Okay, now let's go ahead and try this out. Oh, let's fix that. So this should be ./nav. And it looks like we have an issue. Oh, I don't know what I was doing there. So I put this inside another object here, which doesn't make much sense. This is also supposed to be on one line. Go ahead and fix that. So it should look just like that. And finally, the last thing was I didn't put the slashes here. Okay, we'll go and fix that and save that. Hopefully that should be it. And okay, so I didn't ever use my use styles. Let's go ahead and do a const use styles, or const classes equals use styles. There we go. Easy for me to forget some of these things, but that should fix that issue. And there we go. So now we have our navbar, but you'll see one issue is that our cards are not being pushed down from this navbar here. Let's go ahead and update our styles to make sure they show up below the navbar. So we'll update this to maybe 75. Let's go and try that. And it looks a lot better like that. So we'll keep it at 75 for now. And that should fix that issue. Now, right now, this button doesn't work, and there's really nothing here, but we have a basic nav bar we can add to later. Okay, now with that done, we can go ahead and get into some other Next.js basics. And what we'll talk about now is this get server-side props function we can use. So Next.js has some other interesting things when it comes to pre-rendering and data fetching. You can go read up on that, but there are generally two different ways to pre-render in Next.js. By default, Next.js pre-renders every page. So it generates the HTML for each page in advance instead of having it all done in the client like you do in something like just typical React. And so according to their documentation, this should result in better performance and better SEO. So there's two forms, there's static generation and then server-side rendering. For this project, we're not going to go in great detail on these two, but we're just going to use the server-side rendering, which will allow us to use get server-side props to fetch all of our data. And so how this works, if we go to our index page and come down here at the bottom, we can create a function called export async function and call it get server side props. Now here we can fetch our data. And then we'll go ahead and return an object that has a props object. And inside this prop objects, we have all of the props that we then can pass in up here instead of our arguments to access within our page. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and just pass in some dummy data so I can show how this works. We'll do number equals 5, and then number that equal to number. And now we have access to this number value inside of our actual client-side function here. And so I can put in an object and pass a number and make sure this name here matches what we have down here. I can then use that inside of the page here. So I'm going to go ahead and put category and then pass in this and put number. Save that. Let's go ahead and go back to our page now. Oh, I guess in that case isn't like this. So I'll change this to be this. So we'll go ahead and pass in some curly braces, pass in some backticks, category, and then we'll put in a $sign and clear braces and pass in number right there. And there we go. Now it says category 5. And so this get server-side props only runs on the server. So this is one instance where we're using the server-side Next.js functions as well as the client-side Next.js. So what we can do here is we can pass in all of our API calls here, return them as props down here, and then we can access them up here within this props object here. We can pull them all out here. You could also just put props in here and do props.number, but I kind of like this better. We can destructure it and pull out the actual props and just list them out inside of here. And so that's what we'll use here to create all of our API calls. And that is the next step we're going to work on. But before we can do that, we need to go ahead and create some categories inside of our Django REST framework. So if we go back to our browser here, we go into API root, we'll go into categories, and we'll create some new categories. So first things first, we can't create anything without being logged in. I'm going to go ahead and log in with the admin account I created in the last video. So it's just admin and give it the password. And now we should have access to this post field to create new ones. But we also have this test category. I'm going to go ahead and update this one as well because we don't need a test category. And so for now, I'm going to go ahead and create 4 categories. We might create more in the future, but for now, we'll just create 4 just to give us something to start with. So first one will be food and drinks. We'll give it an ordinal of 1. We'll go ahead and put that to update that one. We can go ahead now and go back to our category list and create some new ones. So I'm going to go ahead and create another one called shopping. Give this an ordinal of 2. We'll put this test business object on all of them for now, and we'll change that in the future as well, but for now it's fine. Then we'll go ahead and create another one here, and we'll call this one health. This will be 3. We'll post that. Then finally, we'll create one called services, and this will be an ordinal of 4. We'll go ahead and post that as well. Now, if we go to our get on all categories, we should have 4 categories: food and drinks, shopping, health, and services. Okay, there we go. So now we have our categories. Let's go and make an API call to grab this data. So for this, we're going to go ahead and use Axios. So I need to install that. Go ahead and stop that, and we'll run npm I Axios to install Axios. And now we'll go ahead and rerun our server again. Now with that done, let's go ahead now and create the API call. So instead of this right here, we replace this with const destructure the result to pull the response.data out of it. And this will set equal to await axios.get. And then we'll go ahead and pass an http://localhost port 8000. categories. In this case, we want categories, so we can find that by going to the root, API root, and going to whatever URL we have here. So in this case, it's localhost 8000 categories will give us all of our categories. And a GET request on this URL will return all of them. It'll return this list right here. We have the count, next, previous, and all the results right here. So now we have our results. We can go ahead and return that right here. So I'm going to change this number to categories. And then we'll go ahead and set the value to be data.results, which is the list. You'll see right here, this list of all of our data. Okay, now with that done, let's go ahead and add categories as a prop up here. So replace this number here. And instead of passing in just category, we'll go ahead and pass in, or actually, we'll do this. Put some random stuff there for now. Let's go ahead and create a loop to go over all of our categories and create a grid item for each category. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these other two. This dummy data we don't need. Get rid of all that. And we'll go ahead and create a loop now. And so the easiest way to do this inside React or in Next.js is to use the map function. So what we'll do here is we'll go right above our grid item component right here. We'll put some curly braces and we'll do categories.map. And then we can go ahead and pass in a name for each iteration. In this case, we'll just be category. Create an arrow function and then put parentheses. Make sure this is not curly braces, otherwise this will not work for you. It will not render correctly and it will cause a lot of issues. So make sure it's just parentheses instead. Then we'll go ahead and grab this whole grid item and not this last one because that's for the container. We'll go and paste that inside of this loop here. Just like that. There we go. Okay, and now instead of here, I can go ahead and pass in our $sign and curly braces and pass in category dot, and we called it name. So category.name to grab the name of the category dot name, and then down here we'll do something similar. So subheader, we will do backticks and we'll do C all, and we'll pass in the category.name again, category.name, and we'll do businesses. So see all, shopping businesses or food and drink businesses. We'll go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and jump back into here. And it's giving us this error, categories is undefined. It does this sometimes. I'm still not sure why, but sometimes you have to kind of mess with it for a little bit to get it to load the first time. Okay, there we go. So now it's saying Axios not defined. That's because I never imported it. So sometimes if you use that error if it's undefined, go ahead and just refresh the page a couple of times. Maybe do a Control-Shift-R to refresh it and get without the cache and see if that fixes it. I'm still not sure why that happens or how to fix it, but that generally does fix it if you do that. But up here at the top, let's go ahead and import Axios. So we'll do import Axios from Axios. Save that. Okay, there we go. And you'll see now that we have our categories being stuck above this again. Occasionally with Next.js, with the dev server, it doesn't seem to happen on production. At least it has happened to me yet on production, and from what I found online, it doesn't seem to happen very often in production. But the style sheet doesn't always render in the dev server correctly, and sometimes you'll have this issue where it doesn't show up. If you make a change to the code, so I go to the code here and I just add like a space here or something, save that, then it's magically fixed. So it only happens in the dev server, so it should be fine when you go to production, but sometimes you'll need to do that to get that to work. Okay, so I'll go and take the space away, and then we're back to where we were. And you'll see all of our categories are loading correctly. So that's really it for this video. We wanted to get our categories and our basic page set up and go over some basic Next.js concepts. There's lots more we'll probably talk about later, but that's hopefully a little basic that will get you started at least being able to build a simple front end with Next.js using Git server-side props and the routing system that they have. That's pretty useful and pretty helpful to quickly put together a site. And so that is it for this video. I'll put the links to all of the code and all of the documentation in the description, so you can go through that if you want to read more about this. We'll come back in the future and make more changes to this and build a fully functioning web app using Next.js over the next few videos. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.